I must say that there will be a number of conspiracy theorists who wonder why it was that development took place on the same day as the inauguration, and whether the authorities...
Taylor Swift-themed dance class attack on the 29th of July in Southport has sent shockwaves through the UK, but some crazy conspiracy theories have been adding up to the mysterious nature of this case.
In doing, whilst under arrest at the police station, he was heard to say, "It's a good thing those children are dead. I'm so glad and so happy."
Some shocking details about Axel Ruda-Cabana's background are surfacing, and the more we dig, the more suspicious this case becomes.
Robert Jenrick knows this, Nigel Farage knows this, Kemi Badenoch knows this. All the newspaper columnists, all the newspaper editors, they all know this, but they either pretend or profess not.
Social media is exploding with conspiracy theories. People are questioning the official narrative, pointing out inconsistencies in the details they are being told.
On the 29th of July 2024, 3 girls were killed by a teenager in Southport. This is what happened. It was a warm and sunny Monday morning when Axel Ruda-Cabana left his home in Banks in Lancashire on foot. He was seen on CCTV walking to a bus stop nearby. He was wearing a green hoodie and had covered his face with a surgical mask. He was carrying a kitchen knife with a 20-centimetre long blade bought on Amazon.
This boy, Axel Ruda-Cabana, was far more dangerous than the authorities assumed him to be.
He ordered a taxi and was picked up at 11:30. His destination was 4.5 miles away, a holiday dance club in Southport where 26 girls aged between 6 and 13 were taking part in a Taylor Swift workshop.
Number 34A, yeah.
He arrived in Hart Street at 11:43, but he refused to pay the taxi fare.
Yet he was walking freely on the streets of the UK despite his past details being known.
From the taxi's dashcam, he is seen looking into the building before heading inside. Moments later, screams were heard. Police say he moved around the room, stabbing indiscriminately. 11 children were attacked, some of them receiving many wounds. Merseyside police received the first emergency call at 11:47, and at 11:57 a.m, the first police officer arrived at the scene. 9-year-old Alice Da Silva Aguirre, 6-year-old BB King, and 7-year-old Elsie Stankham.
The internet is on fire with conspiracy theories, and rightfully so. Was Ruda-Cabana's crime downplayed on purpose? 3 innocent kids were brutally murdered in a dance class in Southport. Were the authorities protecting someone? And most importantly, why was he not charged with terrorism, despite having an Al-Qaeda manual and a poison? But the reality is that the Labour Party was so desperate to control the narrative. Why did Keir Starmer and the authorities withhold key details for months? Along with the conspiracy theories, some terrifying facts are also coming out from the courtroom updates.
He was saying in the court that he was ill, that he wasn't feeling well. He repeatedly shouted for a paramedic, and the defence team then told the court that he hadn't eaten for a number of days, that he'd drunk very little over that period of time, and that was the explanation for why he was shouting. He said, "I can't remain quiet. I'm not going to remain quiet. I'm not feeling fine. I feel ill," and then accused the judge of not giving him any support.
In the latest UK criminal court updates, some details are quite horrific. There's something incredibly bizarre about how quickly Axel Ruda-Cabana changed his plea. One moment he was maintaining his innocence, forcing the families of his victims to brace for a lengthy, painful trial. The next, he starts screaming and shouting, asking for the delay. The timing of it all raises more questions than answers.
One of the victim's family members shouted "coward" as he left the dock. And a few minutes later, an officer returned to say that medical staff had seen Axel Ruda-Cabana. They're happy with his state of fitness, but they wanted a second opinion. The judge decided that the sentencing hearing could continue in his absence. Prosecutors have told the court that on his computer devices there were plenty of documents that demonstrated he had a long-standing obsession with violence, killing and genocide, and that having researched atrocities and crimes committed by others, the evidence suggests, they said, that he set out to emulate them on the 29th of July last year.
Then there's the strange way the Labour has handled this case from the start in a shambolic way. Information was trickled out in carefully controlled doses, as if they were afraid of what the public might do with the full story. The police knew the public was demanding transparency, yet key details, his past behavior, his possible influences, even his full motivations, were locked behind vague statements and legal restrictions. Was this about ensuring a fair trial, or was it about preventing outrage?
Whilst under arrest at the police station, he was heard to say, "It's a good thing those children are dead. I'm so glad and so happy." The prosecutors then proceeded to very clearly outline what happened on the day, describing the events and the chaotic scenes that happened when he entered the Heart studio space and began attacking children. The victims' families have been in court listening to all of this.
Something about the Axel Ruda case just doesn't sit right. The official version of events is full of contradictions, missing details, and outright attempts to control the narrative. The brutal Southport killings left 3 young girls dead and 10 others seriously injured, yet the government's response has been nothing short of shameful.
Family members were given the option to leave the court. They decided not to, that they wanted to remain. And that is where we are. There are incredibly gruesome and upsetting details that are coming out, even today, about the scenes that happened when Axel Ruda began stabbing the children. How the people running the class tried to help the children, that one went into a toilet cubicle with a child and locked the door, thinking that the other children had escaped, only to continue to hear screams.
And let's talk about the media. Some outlets bent over backwards to downplay certain aspects of the case, while others sensationalized every available detail. The inconsistency in reporting was staggering. One moment we were told Ruda was just a disturbed individual, and the next, whispers of extremist connections started making the rounds. The public was left trying to piece together a story that never quite added up. Why was the full truth so hard to come by?
So we know that because he was only 17 when these appalling acts were committed, he cannot go to the prison for the rest of his life.
He can go to prison for the rest of his life, but not under a whole life term.
Right.
It's a subtle difference. The sentence that can be imposed upon him will have to be life with a minimum term of X number of years. That's for the judge to decide. That's the minimum number of years before which he's eligible for parole. It's possible that he is then denied parole for the rest of his life.
One of the most unsettling aspects of this case is how the authorities handled his background. This was a man who had been flagged multiple times, prevent referrals, troubling online activity, and even a fascination with terrorism. Yet somehow, he slipped through every crack in the system. Officials now claim their hands were tied, that there was no legal basis to intervene earlier. But how many times have we heard that excuse before?
One of the things that has happened is that CCTV footage from the police officers who first responded to this incident was shown to the court as they shouted "taser, taser" as they arrived at the dance studio and tried to find Axel Ruda as he was committing the attack. But that is one of the few things that have been played to the jury that won't hugely upset people in terms of the detail of it, because the rest of it is truly shocking.
The decision not to charge him with terrorism remains one of the most controversial moves in this entire case. Here was a man in possession of an Al-Qaeda training manual. He researched poisons. He carried out a targeted attack that left 3 little girls dead. If this wasn't terrorism, then what is? The authorities claim he lacked a clear political motive, that his goal was simply to kill. But isn't that the same excuse that's been used to avoid labeling similar cases as terrorism in the past?
Islamist, but the fact that he had said in school on a number of occasions, apparently he told schoolmates, Britain needs genocide like Rwanda. At a football match at school, he talked about the need for a white genocide in Britain. Now, these may have been among a number of different remarks that he'd made. We know that his obsession with violence, beheadings, horrific scenes and genocide had...
Let's not forget that crime in England and Wales isn't just rising, it's surging back to pre-pandemic levels. The latest data from the ONS shows a 10% increase in crime, with violent robberies, fraud and injuries climbing higher. This isn't just a statistic, it's a warning, because when everyday crimes become this common, it raises bigger questions. What's fueling this surge? Failing policies? A struggling economy? Or is it something deeper? One thing is certain, if this trend continues, the consequences would be severe. Another theory was Ruda obsession with white genocide.
It matters, And yes, as you say, there's some confusion as to why this hasn't come out, at least some details sooner.
Oh, exactly. And it does strike me that if we did have, and let's bring it down to basics, because we know what we're talking about and we don't pussyfoot around these things here at Talk.
Yes.
If this was a white man who had been accused and is now obviously pleaded guilty to these killings, and it had been black or Asian children who had been stabbed.
Axel Rudakubana wasn't just another troubled youth with a history of violence. His obsession with genocides ran disturbingly deep. Then there's evidence that neighbors recall seeing police cars outside the Rudakubana residence multiple times. Were they responding to threats, conducting welfare checks, or were they aware that something far worse was brewing? If they knew he was capable of extreme violence, why was he still free? Did authorities underestimate him, or were they reluctant to intervene for reasons we may never fully understand?
About that affecting the fairness of any future trial. I think the rules are different when the concern is the other way around. Do you think that is possibly the case?
Do you know what, this is the feeling of some of the family members. They've said to me, expressly, like, we feel like if this had been a white supremacist attack against, Muslim children or a group of black children, that this would have been over pretty much within a few weeks, and we would have heard every sordid detail that there would to be known about this. So as with the grooming gangs, there is this kind of suspicious air to it. Are you keeping stuff back simply because this individual...
Even before his final act of violence, Rudakubana's behavior was escalating. He had been removed from mainstream education after bringing a knife to school. In another incident, he openly threatened teachers and classmates with a hockey stick one he had scribbled names on, almost like a hit list. This wasn't just outbursts of aggression, this was premeditated intimidation. And yet, rather than taking drastic action, social workers continued their usual protocols. Sure, they insisted on police officers being present during their meetings with him, but what did that really do? If they knew he was dangerous,
there
why
were
wasn't he being
immediate
detained, monitored more
rumours
closely, or
that
even institutionalized?
Rudakubana was an asylum seeker, that he'd come across the channel on a boat. These things became shared and viewed millions and millions of times. And a legal system and a political system built for an era pre.
And this is exactly where the internet takes over. In the modern age, silence isn't just a pause, it's an invitation. The moment officials hold back details, whether for legal reasons or just to avoid public panic, speculation fills the gaps. And not just harmless speculation, full-blown conspiracy theories that spiral out of control. Social media doesn't wait for the justice system to catch up. It takes every missing piece of information and reshapes it into something dramatic, something sinister. Because in today's world, nothing can just be what it is. There always has to be a bigger picture, a hidden motive, a secret cover-up lurking beneath the surface.
What happened in other parts of the country, people saying enough is enough, but on the basis of information that was scant, how much of it was true, how much wasn't true, it not only created a debate about our culture, because of this idea, was this person somehow foreign, and therefore why was he here? It also raised a debate about how information is shared. How do we protect due process? We have due process for a very important reason in this country.
Some online theories even claimed that Axel Rudakubana's sentencing was deliberately scheduled to land on the same day as Donald Trump's inauguration. Somehow, a local UK murder trial and the most watched political event in America were supposedly linked in some master plan to bury the case under media chaos. Never mind the fact that this trial date had been set long before Trump even won the election. Never mind that there was no logical connection between the two events. The timing was enough, and once the internet sees a pattern, it refuses to let go.
Problem when it came to the initial reporting, actually, to be fair, not by the so-called legacy media hated by Elon Musk, always point out, the legacy media don't tell you the truth. No, actually, it's people who go and publish on the likes of X with impunity that don't tell you the truth. So let's just be reminded of Rudakubana's background. His father, Alphonse, moved to the UK from Rwanda in 2002. But actually, Rudakubana was not an illegal immigrant or indeed foreign-born. He was...
But here's the thing. When officials refuse to address these theories, they don't die. They grow. Say nothing, and people assume there's something to hide. Deny it, and suddenly the denial itself is proof of a cover-up.
somehow think that all of the lies told about the Southport suspect in the immediate aftermath of the crime, all of them remain lies. But I've seen people on social media claiming yesterday that they've somehow been vindicated. It's quite extraordinary. All of the lies are still lies. Absolutely none of the misinformation has been refuted or undermined. But you've got these half-wits jumping up and down all over social media, up to and including Robert Jenrick, claiming that there's some sort of conspiracy going on, or claiming that there's some sort of problem here.
And let's talk about the media circus. Some outlets bent over backwards to downplay certain aspects of the case, while others sensationalized every available detail. The inconsistency in reporting was staggering. One moment we were told Ruda Kubana was just a disturbed individual, and the next, whispers of extremist connections started making the rounds. The public was left trying to piece together a story that never quite added up. Why was the full truth so hard to come by?
Either. I certainly didn't expect to see a contender for the leadership of the Conservative Party sounding like one of the nuttiest conspiracy theorists on Twitter, but hey, I should have seen it coming after Suella Braverman attacked the police over cenotaph policing. But here we are.
Keir Starmer and the authorities kept the public in the dark for months, refusing to disclose even the most basic facts about the attacker. Why? Because the truth is far more unsettling than they'd like people to believe.
I'll mention the handful of people referencing the ongoing case involving attacks at Manchester Airport involving police and members of the public, and some CCTV, of course, as that has been released. That fits entirely into what we've just been saying. That is a complicated case with moving parts involving also an independent police investigation and no early pleas of guilt.
The media went into full damage control mode, pushing a sanitized version of events while ignoring the real concerns that people were raising. And now, as the full details begin to emerge, it's clear that this wasn't just a horrific crime. It was a case that exposed deep failures at every level of the system.
Justice. It speaks to two completely different exercises of justice. I think it might be worth listening to what Robert Jenrick had to say this morning, because I honestly never thought the day would dawn when a senior Conservative politician with ministerial experience began to sound like Billy Buncher-Numbers with a bulldog avatar on social media and a profound ignorance.
The biggest question that has everyone talking is why Ruda Kubana was never charged with terrorism. This was a young man in possession of an Al-Qaeda training manual. He had manufactured the deadly poison ricin and stored it under his bed. He carried out a violent, premeditated attack in a public space, killing indiscriminately.
As the dad of 3 daughters, the Southport attack hit me personally. Of course, the legal process needs to be respected, but I'm seriously concerned that the facts may have been withheld from the public here. The government and authorities told us for months that they were not treating this as a terrorist incident. But today, the attacker has been charged with terrorist offences, and it has been revealed that he has been allegedly reading terrorist manuals.
If this doesn't meet the definition of terrorism, then what does? Even the police working on the case admitted they couldn't understand the decision. Investigators repeatedly pushed for terror charges, but they were shot down every time. Instead, prosecutors stuck to the weak argument that Ruda Kubana wasn't fighting for a cause and that his only motivation was to kill. A ridiculous excuse, and one that raises even more questions about what's really going on behind closed doors.
So Keir Starmer must urgently explain to the country what he knew about the Southport attack and when he learnt it. Across the board, the hard reality of mass migration is being covered up. The public can see with their own eyes that they are being gaslit by the liberal elite.
Extraordinary. This suspect was born in Wales.
Was this a deliberate attempt to avoid uncomfortable discussions about who gets labelled a terrorist in Britain? Were the authorities worried about the political fallout if this case had been classified as an act of terror?
Robert Jenrick, Telegraph piece. He says Starmer's decision not to release all this information in the summer that we've heard this week about Axel Ruda Kubana contributed to the anger which spilled into the riots, and that the sense of a cover-up will permanently damage trust in the criminal justice system. Do the Conservatives who are continuing to bang this drum about cover-up, have they got a point, or is this just
Then there's the question of why this trial didn't receive the attention it deserved from the authorities. Where was the outrage from the usual figures who claimed to stand against violence? Where were the grand speeches, the promises of reform? It was eerily quiet, almost as if certain people in power didn't want this case dominating the headlines for too long. What made this case different from others that sparked widespread political reactions?
Media platforms operate. Their business models don't help things, actually exacerbate the problems here, right? They in many ways are designed to amplify content which keeps eyes on screens, which helps them with their advertising revenue, right? But what these business models mean is quite often the sort of content which is being fed into people is that which is most likely to inflame tensions.
And could just be downright false.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this case, absolutely was.
Even now, with the case supposedly closed, the lingering doubts remain. The justice system worked on the surface, but did it work the way it was supposed to? Or was it carefully managed to prevent the public from asking too many uncomfortable questions? The government wants people to move on, but there are still too many loose ends to ignore. And if this case was handled like this, what else is being swept under the rug? So, what do you think is really behind this crime surge? Is it economic struggles, failing leadership, or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the issues in the UK that actually matter.